Hey, y'all, I've got one for you today. Have you ever found yourself trapped in a cycle of saying always or never? Maybe you've caught yourself saying, I always mess things up, or my partner will never forgive me. These are absolute statements that are black and white thoughts, or so they're black and white thinking. If you have that experience of thinking in extremes, either in a negative way or a positive way or a hurtful way, that's what we're going to go through today. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started. Welcome. I am excited about this podcast today. There is a name that I've wanted to give this, and I recognize it can be triggering, specifically if a betrayed partner heard it. But the title of the podcast, it's 50 Shades of Grey. There's a metaphor behind it. So please don't think of the movie. 50 Shades of Grey stands for something else. This holds a ton of relevance for my life because there's black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking that I experience. And it's something that I think is tied to my ADHD. Actually, I know it's tied to my ADHD, but it's a human experience. What is black or white thinking or all or nothing thinking? It's a cognitive distortion, and our brains find those most efficient ways of doing things. I want to give you some examples of what black or white thinking or all or nothing thinking is. I always fell, or they're never going to understand me, or I just slipped and I'm never going to get better. My partner's never going to forgive me. I'm all bad. Intrinsically, I'm just bad. Or I figured it out and I've arrived. I'll never figure this out. Or I found the magic. I found the part of my recovery that's going to really change everything. Or maybe this one, I feel hopeless now, so I'm always going to be feeling this way. There's a big impact that comes with black or white thinking or all or nothing thinking. The thinking can lead to a lot of emotional distress and some really rigid beliefs. I think about how I grew up, and we treated, in my family of origin, my experience, we treated a lot of things that were sexual just as bad. Because my sexual response or sexuality really wasn't talked about, I had to make a lot of leaps cognitively where I went, okay, we were just watching a TV show and there was some type of sexual scene that came on and I was trying to understand it. And we turned that off and we said, hey, that's not appropriate. But we didn't really talk about it. So what I did is I thought sexual things are off limits. They're not good. I'm not supposed to be doing those things, or I'm not supposed to be watching those things. So if I ever experienced those same feelings associated with that, what I tied in is that mean I'm bad. So basically everything sexual for me became bad, anything that I experienced. So I had this picture, this kind of like this line, this linear line. And on one end was my sexual response, and the other end was fantasy. And I couldn't tell the difference. And I didn't know what the difference between was a healthy sexual response, my responding as a teenager, and then also leaning all the way into fantasy. What was that middle ground look like? So it was very black and white in my thinking. I want to highlight the impact that black and white thinking has on decision making and problem solving. If we make things black or white, we really struggle to learn to problem solve for ourselves. And this can be a part of growing up in a rigid environment. If I'm just taught what to believe, what to think, without the process of really seeking to understand what I think and what I believe, I really am stuck on the end of things are good or they are bad. And what's in the middle, that exploration ceases to exist. If my sexual response is bad, that must mean that I'm bad. And instead, what can happen specifically for a child or for an adult in general, which is the exploration of understanding what the middle ground looks like. And that's where the cognitive distortion gets in the way of emotional and cognitive growth. Let's talk a little bit about why we tend to think in black or white. The human brain loves the preference of simplicity and certainty. We get regulation when we get calm from making sense out of things, out of complex things. So to get back to a regulated state, I make sense of what I'm experiencing. And if I go to this place where maybe it's actually hurtful of just black or white thinking, all or nothing thinking, it can help our brain regulate. For example, for the men that I work with who slip, if they go to a place of, I guess I'm just bad. I know this sounds crazy, but believe it or not, the brain just makes sense out of that. And it goes, okay, now I can regulate a little bit more. Now I can make sense of things instead of going to a place where we stay in an uncertainty. Our brains are very efficient. Call this the efficiency mechanism. If you only have two categories to choose from, and Alana Gordon talks about this with her clients, she talks about if you only have two categories to choose from, then you're going to have to avoid the deep dive and understanding that it's more complex than that. And those options of looking at things can be really uncomfortable. I remember listening to her talk about her experiences in case consulting with clients around what she does with a betrayed partner in I either leave or I stay. I'm either going to just divorce or I'm going to just forgive and recognizing there are way more options than that, but that's what our brains do. And she does an amazing job providing space for that, recognizing the complexity isn't easy. It's a lot harder. So the complexity of life, it's about embracing these gray areas. I want to illustrate the concept of this. I made the mistake the other day, y'all, of doing this. And because black and white thinking is this cognitive distortion thing is something I still continue to experience and still struggle with and try to recognize it. In fact, it'd be interesting to go back through this podcast and listen to it again and go, how much time did I experience cognitive distortion even doing this podcast? Anyway, I made the mistake the other day of making a TikTok and I said that the problem with cheating is the hiding and the secrecy keeps your partner from being able to make a decision for themselves. In an effort to communicate one of the destructive parts of cheating, I did something black and white. This cognitive distortion, all or nothing, was is that the problem with cheating is so that's very black and white, saying that's the problem, right? Well, it's way more complex than that. It's one of the aspects of the problem, and it's complex. And my reasoning for doing that was to illustrate a point. But what I want to do is I want to recognize it's one aspect and I can still communicate without being black or white in my communication. There's some really big benefits of embracing this ambiguity and this uncertainty of living in the gray areas as far as exploring the gray and recognizing the complexity. It brings us benefits like flexibility, open mindedness, new perspectives, innovative solutions, personal growth, adaptability to change, collaboration, resilience. And as I'm speaking to the men or the experience of the person who betrayed their partner, recognizing all of that flexibility, open mindedness, new perspectives, you, well, I'm about to do black and white. I almost did something black and white. I almost said, you can't heal your relationship unless you experience that type of embracing that ambiguity and uncertainty of that open mindedness. Because often you are not going to be able to hear your partner if you are not open minded and flexible in your thinking and how you see them. It just creates so much resilience by leaning into that space and challenging thoughts. There's some strategies to overcome the black and white thinking that I wanted to share with you. So let's discuss that there's, first of all, mindfulness practices that challenge our black and white thinking. We use group and one on one work to explore this thinking. If you did come and join up and you sat with me in a consult and you decided to do some one on one work or some group work, we would actually implement a process to explore this. And what that would look like is you'd identify that distortion, you'd challenge that distortion, you'd replace it with something new, and then you'd practice a new belief. So you'd go, this is where I'm really at. Let's just call that first one. I'm intrinsically broken if I can't stop looking at porn. Something is wrong with me and I'm just broken. So you identify that's all or nothing thinking. I would challenge that and go, okay, let me explore that and understand where that belief comes from. And then I'm going to replace it with something new and then I practice that belief. And we find the words that identify the black or white thinking because one of the biggest challenges is that I'm actually experiencing it. And this is what I have to do. This is what I want to do all the time. Let me give you a bunch of words that I would notice about myself. I always mess things up. I never do anything right. If I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. Every time I try, I fail. None of my efforts matter. Got like 6 more for you. I just wrote down a bunch. There's nothing good about this situation. I'll be stuck in this situation forever. It's impossible for me to change. No one cares about me. This is totally hopeless, and I absolutely can't do this. I can find those scripts or those lines in my thinking and in my dialogue and go, okay, there it is. There it is. I want to tackle that one. I want to identify that. I want to challenge that. I want to replace that with something else. Now I'm going to practice it. I'm going to do it over and over and over again. And if this belief system, this black or white thinking, this thought, if it's been around for decades, embrace yourself for the opportunity for a lot of awareness and a lot of discomfort in that. My encouragement here for you is to just reflect on your own thinking patterns, recognize the instances of that black or white thinking, and then I just want to provide some reassurance that that change is gradually going to happen. It requires so much patience and so much practice. Just be patient with yourself and be patient with the people around you because it's thoughts about self and it's thoughts about others. And when you leave that, it's going to fill a void and that void's it's going to be intense. Look into cognitive distortions, just some additional resources for you. If you look into them, all or nothing thinking, black or white, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of really good content. And then if you just notice speaking to the men or the people that betrayed their partner, if you notice yourself just going like that, I'm never going to get over this, or I'm all bad, or I'm intrinsically broken, or she's never going to trust me again. Just those things. Let's identify some of those patterns together. If you're not already with me, come book a consult, come spend time. It doesn't necessarily need to be with me. Just spend time with somebody uncovering some of this stuff. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.